The text is coming from Mark chapter 7, and I want to remind you about what we talked last week when we talked about Christ and his disciples were in troubles because of a simple issue that was his disciples were eating and not cleaning their hands. And he was accused, and then Christ talked about what's really make you dirty is the food that goes in your mouth and that somehow, even if you get infected, but the system, whatever comes through your body, it will go through and you get healed. But then he was highlighting what about the diseases that's coming within that it cannot go through your system. And Christ was comparing the practice of those who are worshiping God by lips and those who are really having God in their hearts. And today we are going even deeper as we saw that the competition was between Christ and the Pharisees. They are more like in the presidential debate, Christ on one side debating why his disciples did not do anything wrong, and the Pharisees are protecting the tradition, the elders. We are here to represent Moses' tradition, and you guys are not following the Moses tradition. Today we're going really into a very, very interesting but also troubling text today. This conversation, you read everything in this text. This reading comes from verse 24 to 37. But there is one verse that makes you forget whatever came before and you forget what came after. The conversation between this woman and Christ. When Christ's sound really is not the Christ we know. So when you read this chapter 7, verse 27, when Christ talk about human and dogs and people on the table and those who are waiting for the crumbs, you have some very interesting ways. Either you want to run and ignore because this is a harsh statement, or you want to rescue your guy, and our guy in this case, Christ. We want to keep him in a good way. This sounds really very hard message that make our guy that all the time is peaceful, he's generous, he's just a lovely guy, he says everything, he's our God, So we have two intentions, either to ignore or either to rescue Christ from this harsh statement. And one of the easy way to answer, Christ was doing that on purpose to see how this woman can really stand her ground and just know he was testing her faith. Maybe I'll buy some of that, but not to the point where really, when Christ talking and comparing her to a dog or to her people, he's not talking about cute little puppies that we are talking about today, This is the culture that not even honor women, just to remember that. So there is no place for the idea that as we think today, animals is honored a lot in our culture today. They are part of our families. We even split budget and we take care of them. So when Christ using the idea of the dogs, he's using really the harshest word that you can imagine he's using. He's not talking about cute little animals, he's talking about these dirty beings that they have no room. And before that, let's just try to do not worry about your Christ in the story. That's what I found myself saying that to myself. I am not here to rescue Christ or to even put dirt on Christ. The statement is really very harsh. This is the truth. The statement is unbelievable. It sounds like this is not Christ and should have some meaning. But remember, this is part of what Mark was the earliest gospel, so there is no more addition. So in the Gospel of Mark, you see a lot of raw things that sometimes gets us in trouble as Christians. And if you remember from long time, I told you about how in the Gospel of Mark, he talks too much about John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is the competitor of Jesus Christ. He's a great guy, but he was shining too much in the community to the point where Christ really will be in the shadow of this guy. But Mark is really telling us the truth. If I am today after 2,000 years and I have the power, I tell Mark, please, you need to do some editing here. Your statement is not good for our guy. You are putting too much light on John the Baptist. But this is one of our historical facts that says actually this was a true story. Because if Christians in the early days have the chance to remove it, they will remove it. But because it was a truth that spread around, they cannot take it out. And the same in the story. This story, if I was sitting next to Mark, I'd say, Mark, you are putting us in trouble about this woman. She's a woman. Not only a woman, she's a woman from this outsider, unclean people. And really, it's very intentional in Mark when Mark tells you more details. When he says she's from the Syro-Phoenician, he's talking about the area where modern day today is Syria and Lebanon. That's where he's talking about. So he's like, okay, this is enough. But he say she's Greek. So he's putting more the emphasis. He put all the bad words into this woman. So he's intentionally was trying to say how this woman was so far from God's grace according to the Jewish idea. She's a woman. We have no idea about if she has a man or not, but there is no man in the story. We know this, the one thing that's driving this woman to do anything she can on earth is her sick eldest daughter who was possessed by unclean spirit. She moved. We don't know how far she walked, but we know she is from this area. She's from the Syro-Phoenician area. So as we see this, all the words that's trying to say, these women are just coming from far away. I want to take you into a different journey in the story. Before this happened, Christ told his disciples, I'm tired. I want to be alone. Let me get into the house. We know he get into the house, and he said, do not let anybody bother me. Do not let anyone know that I am here. So Christ's intention was tired, exhausted, want to be alone. That is his desire as a human being. And how many times you and me, we like to be alone, but life did not leave you alone, right? So how many times we like really to escape things, but even when we escape and we go somewhere, Jesus wanted to keep his presence secret, but he could not. This woman who lived in the Syrian Phoenician area, as I said, and exactly in the southern part of Lebanon. I don't know how many of you are watching the news. I know there is no good news coming from the Middle East these days, right? So anytime you hear this is the area actually that you hear about, the southern part of Lebanon where you see everything happen. This is where Christ actually was walking in this region and do many things because the borders is very close in the southern part of Lebanon. I'm talking about modern day Lebanon and also the northern side of modern day Israel. So as you hear all of that and find that Christ walking into this area that's considered unclean, this woman, she begged Christ to heal her daughter who was possessed with unclean spirit. And as we see the story goes on, this woman, she heard about this guy, she came to the house, and the house said, Christ does not want anybody here. Even when he was talking about that, he was thinking about his own people. He was thinking about a male Jewish person with a privilege who can knock the door on Christ at any time and say, I need you. He said, even these people, I do not want them here. So these kind of people, to be a woman, to be a Gentile, to be a non-Jew, and with all these bad definitions of who she is, she break through the door, she came into the house, and she's not standing there blind waiting for somebody to say, oh, let's come in and what do you want? She initiated the conversation. And it's a big violation for women in the Middle East or in the culture, even until today. Even if we let you in, you should be glad and happy that you are in, and you should be quiet. You do not say, you already crossed the line. And even when she crossed the line, she's not waiting. She is so obsessed with her love to her daughter to come and beg Christ and say that my daughter needs your help. As we see that Christ offers a harsh story. And this is Christ's way. You tell him a simple thing, I need this or I need that. And instead of that, he gives you a long assignments of things, and he gives you a very harsh story that you go around and say, what this guy is talking about? I'm just asking for a simple thing. Give me this or give me that. And Christ will give you a big story that makes you lost in the middle and say, I didn't even know why I'm here, what I asked for. And as Christ gave her this harsh story, and instead of selling, can easily say, go, your kid, just leave me alone, you'll get what you want. But Christ wants to make this somehow is another human experience. That when he talked about this table that is prepared for the children to eat as much as they want, this is Christ's language. And he told her, it's not right to give this food for the dogs. And the woman responded in verse 28 in such an amazing, wise statement. Just think about you and me. If somebody offend you, how do we react, huh? Do you remember when you almost lose your mind or somebody's driving crazy on the road or bothering you, right? When somebody do anything that's really offends you or your dignity, what do we do as a human being? We get defensive, right? We get angry. We start war to war, words to words, insult to insult, and things gets more. And I wonder about what was in her mind and her heart to be so peaceful. To actually, I never saw Christ being challenged. Christ being challenged by this woman. My guy that all the time I see, he's walking on the water, he's doing everything. He's the one just defeated the Pharisees and the scribes, and he did amazing things. He's the one that quiet people by wisdom, by love, by his silence, he offered like a few words and makes us in awe. What this guy, what kind of magic and words this guy can do. I never experienced Christ being challenged by another human being. He challenged by who? By a Greek woman who lived in the Syro-Phoenician area. Unclean. And maybe there is a lot of details about why there is no man in her life, because the normal way is the man that will show up, the man will be with the man gathering. But maybe the only thing this woman and her daughter, that they only have each other. Maybe they have no other man to provide and to protect them in this culture. And this woman, with her amazing statement, she addressed Christ, did not call him, hey you, how can you talk to me this way? You know the first word she said? Lord, Rabbi, teacher. She gave Christ the dignity and the respect. He even sometimes did not get it from his own people. Anger has no room. Even she has the right to be angry. She has the right to respond as any human being, insult to insult, and pain into pain. By addressing Christ, calling him Lord, even the dogs at the table can eat children's crumbs, can eat small pieces. They're so desperate. And when we hear the statement, how amazing this woman is saying that when you are so desperate, you are taking the little things. If you look at statement from a social justice perspective, this is not a good statement at all. But this is a woman in need. She is not there to advocate for some kind of social agenda. She does not care about to defeat Christ and to create a big propaganda. She's not running to run United States, She is her only thing that she cares about is my own daughter. I will move heaven and earth. My love for my own daughter is obsessing me, as my daughter is obsessed by this unclean spirit. I'm obsessed with a clean spirit that's called love. I'm so controlled and overwhelmed by that. I want to take an insult if this will get me to make my daughter as a new being. And Christ in verse 29 offered a reward for her strong faith, and told her that your daughter is healed. Go home. And when she went home in the next verse, she found her daughter sleeping peacefully in her bed. But today we ask ourselves why this harsh statement came out of Christ's mouth. Maybe Christ was trying to pretend to be another Pharisees. Do not forget the story from last week when the Pharisees were trying to be the good guardians of the law. They are the one that's going to protect how the church should run, how the law is, how things constitutionally is organized. It is good to be organized. It's good to follow the book of order or whatever we have in our church or whatever church law that we have. But for saving somebody's life and for practicing the Christian love, all of this is garbage. All of this is useless. If they stand in the way to show God's love, they are useless. When we put the system to how we do things, how we pray, how we preach, how we do communion, how we do all of these things, these are put not to make us a slave. And all of these ways that we do, all the details that we do in a church, they can be seen and they can be revisited and reformed in a different way. So maybe Christ was trying to act as a little Pharisees. And we know that was very common among Jews, like anybody who's not a Jew, this as unclean people. And these people consider equal to animals and dogs. And again, not in our modern way of thinking what animal is. That means actually filthy words. That means the very negative, as you imagine, that anybody, the world is divided by a Jew and non-Jew. And Christ maybe was trying to pretend this way. But Christ was trying to show that God's love cannot be controlled. I tried as a son of God, but also as the human Jesus Christ, I tried to control how God works by saying, let everybody be quiet. Leave me alone. I want to get some peace. I want to be on my own. You want something, but God surprises you by something else. Maybe in the beginning will not make you happy, because nobody likes to be interrupted. Nobody would like to hear a noisy sound while you want to rest and maybe have a good drink or lay down and have a good meal and only talk to people that you like and not those who will come and break the silence. Definitely, this woman is not part of Christ's circle. This woman is not part of the Jewish circle. Why is she here? She's totally in the wrong place. But Christ say, maybe this is how the kingdom of God works. When God surprises you, not all surprises makes you happy. When God surprises you, maybe you do not get the idea in the beginning. So God's kingdom is even challenging Christ himself. Christ being corrected by a woman. Christ being challenged in a good way to say, good kid, good student. How many arrogant teachers cannot stand when they hear a correct answer from their own little students in the class. But a mature, secure teacher will be happy to see that this little child is really raising the knowledge and the ideas into some words that amaze me. Words make me mesmerize and stand and say, like, wow, where is this coming from? Where even these words coming from? Maybe this is a very good example of Christ being a loving human being to say, God's kingdom is greater than any expectation. And God's kingdom is about breaking all the rules and barriers. Did the story ended up here? No. And we know the story that goes to the second one. When Christ went to Sidon, which is Saida in Arabic, which is another city in Lebanon, still walking in the unclean geographical distance among unclean people, according to the Jewish tradition. And as Christ walking there, and then they brought him the deaf man. He could not talk, he cannot hear. So Mark is so wants to focus on the idea that Christ is doing amazing work in unexpected areas. Christ is breaking through by doing that. Friends and family brought this man to Christ begging for healing. And Jesus intentionally took this man away from the crowd. Again, there is something Christ wants to do things secretly or in a small group. He took him and he started to do things and perform the miracle. And in verse 34, Jesus looked at the heaven as an impression of saying, the power is coming from above. God of the heaven will heal him. And he used the word that's very similar in Aramaic and in Arabic, so it is very easy for me to read it, which is iftaha, which means be opened. And we know that Aramaic, Greek, and Arabic are from the same family, so sometimes there is a lot of similarity. So there is a powerful in this word when Christ is saying, Mark wants us to get the taste of how the language sound when some words came literally out of Christ's mouth when he said, iftaha, be opened. To show the power that Christ is ordering his eyes and his mouth and his ears is to be open, all his beings to be open to receive God's love. This man received God's gift of healing, where his life was restored, to be able to hear and to talk. Christ desired to keep things secret from the beginning to the end, but none of his desires happen in this text. His desire, I want to be alone, I want to take rest, I want to stay away, and twice God was saying, no. You have a job to do. So Christ desired to keep things secret, or at least to keep it in the small circle. But instead, Christ became the trend. Christ is all over. All the social media is talking about Christ. And here is what the crowd said, and this is very powerful as I close my sermon. This is the statement came not from the disciples, not from the small circle. This is from those people who are just watching. And most of them, they like to watch without doing anything or saying anything. Here is what the crowd says. He has done everything well. And then they close this by saying, he even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. This is a miracle of healing of the body, but also of the spirit. To be able to listen and to see what's around you. And once you receive God's gift in your life, what do? You should go out and spread the good news and share it with others. He did not heal only his physical being as opening his ears enabling his tongue to move, but he equipped him to use what God gave him to serve God's kingdom. And no, in God's kingdom, there is no barrier. In God's kingdom, everybody welcome to be challenged every day and every night. Amen.